Hey everybody, thank you for taking the time to join today's event, How the Greater Boston Food Bank's NetSuite implementation transformed operations. We have a lot of really great content that we're looking forward to diving into with you today, but I do have a few housekeeping items that I want to touch on before we get started. The webcast console you are looking at can be completely customized. You can resize or move any of the windows that you have open. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple applications you can use. If you have any questions during the webcast, click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. We will try to answer these during the Q&A session towards the end of the webcast, but if we can't get to them on time, someone from NetSuite and Myers-Holum will follow up with you separately. We will be sending you an on-demand version of the webcast in a few days, and you can also check out more webinars, demos, keynotes, and customer videos at youtube.com/netsuite. Finally, if you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please visit our webcast help guide by clicking on the help button below the presentation window. It is a question mark icon and covers common technical issues. With that, we'll go ahead and jump into the meat of today's event. I am joined by Richard Gibbs, the Senior Director of Information Systems at Greater Boston Food Bank, Stephen Wolf, Managing Partner at Myers-Holum, and Marissa Nolan, Delivery Manager of Managed Services at Myers-Holum. So I'll go ahead and turn to you, Richard, to do an intro on yourself and the Greater Boston Food Bank.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction and the opportunity to represent the Greater Boston Food Bank during today's session. My background includes a long industry experience, first as a mechanical engineer, and then that morphed into working within manufacturing organizations, and later changed to implementing ERP systems at a variety of manufacturing companies and distribution organizations, and ultimately director-level positions, including the Greater Boston Food Bank. In March of 2022, I reached my 10-year anniversary at GBFB, and during that time I had this vision for the food bank to move all core business applications from on-prem to cloud-based systems such as NetSuite. NetSuite went live in June of 2018.
Thanks, Rich. This is Stephen Wolf here. I'm a director of our NetSuite practice at Myers-Holum. Rich and I actually worked together on the implementation of NetSuite at Greater Boston Food Bank now about 5 years ago. And that was the first food bank that implemented NetSuite for financials and operations, inventory management, and our ordering portal. And we're really excited now to be on this webinar today and talk about how NetSuite has helped transform Greater Boston Food Bank after they've been now live for 5 years. Marissa, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Stephen. My name is Marissa Nolan. I'm a delivery manager on the managed services side of Myers-Holum. We handle the post-go-live support. So once you've gone through your implementation with our project team, we work with that project team to transition you over for continuing support on NetSuite as long as you need it.
Great. So we'll review the agenda today. We're first going to hear from Rich on an overview just of Greater Boston Food Bank, who they are and what they do. We want to talk a little bit about how Greater Boston Food Bank leverages NetSuite and all the different processes and modules of NetSuite that they use. Then we're going to move into a quick overview demo of NetSuite in Greater Boston Food Bank's instance to show a little bit of those processes and what we've built on NetSuite for food banks. And then we'll finally wrap it up with just an overview of how Myers-Holum is helping other food banks in the ecosystem and take any questions from the audience. So moving on, hear a little bit more from Rich here. So Rich, 4 or 5 years, almost 5 years ago, I think now, we implemented NetSuite alongside of Greater Boston Food Bank. That was the first ERP implementation on NetSuite for really any food bank, I think, in the Feeding America network or in the ecosystem. So what were, the decision points in your ERP journey to evaluate, whether, a new ERP was necessary, and also how did you settle on NetSuite?
Sure. Thanks, Stephen. So our journey towards NetSuite began almost 2 years before our go live. And again, the go live was in June of 2018. So I recognized early on at my tenure at the food bank that we neither had the technology platform, features, ease of use, nor user adoption that would sustain Greater Boston Food Bank's rapid growth in food distribution. So I worked with our senior management and advised the legacy ERP system would not allow us to reach mission goals nor growth within the constraints imposed by the legacy system. So some examples are the requirement for ongoing IT server support because they were an on-prem ERP system. Client server base requiring application installations and dependent on computer operating system versions. No built-in ad hoc reporting capabilities requiring external SQL Server reporting that was limited to IT for report creation. Things like no ability to make changes to the application page layouts or creating custom fields that almost everybody really requires. And the ERP modules on the legacy systems were not fully integrated in a real-time manner and required users to log off systems to process month-end and year-end financial closes. Many processes had to run in batch. So the bottom line, we were looking for a modern web-based solution, fully integrated, real-time, that ran in the cloud to free up IT from actually doing value work rather than just maintaining hardware. So that was kind of in a nutshell one of the reasons why. And the NetSuite solution decision came down to checking off these boxes about, okay, what are we really looking for? The technology stack was right up there as a real hard requirement, but more than that, it was the ability to have a full-functioned, full feature set for business applications from purchasing, inventory, e-commerce that Stephen had mentioned, sales orders, and the list goes on. And then certainly all of the accounting features. So it came down to a bake-off really between two final solutions, but in the end, the powerhouse that NetSuite provided was just a compelling reason.
Awesome, thank you. So, so just to review, we in our initial implementation and still today, I think we bucketed kind of the core process areas where we knew NetSuite was going to be a big, a good fit and a big driver of change in the organization, to obviously the online ordering, which we built using NetSuite SuiteCommerce Advanced, food planning, agency restrictions were a key requirement. All of our food acquisition processes are included. And then our fulfillment and distribution integration with the warehouse management system, and for compliance requirements, obviously your automated reporting, the Feeding America reporting, and then all of the ad hoc reporting you need to use as well. So this was kind of the original mix of features and process areas that NetSuite was used for. Can you talk through how today is Greater Boston Food Bank still using these features, and what does your adoption look like today, now 4 or 5 years after your initial go live?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So it's like, oh my gosh, it's amazing how, as an organization, we've just fully adopted it. Every user has embraced the change. They're very comfortable using the system. You can go to any desk in any functional area, and when you see the NetSuite screen up, you know it's NetSuite because everybody's using the same feature-rich functions, menu navigation, all extremely consistent. But in terms of directly answering your question, first of all, NetSuite has allowed GBFB to ramp up our food distribution in the middle of a global pandemic almost twofold in distribution. And NetSuite was able to handle this increase of transactional loads without any performance degradation whatsoever. So that was a big win. We use NetSuite for all aspects in our normal business processing, including purchasing, which we also built out three-way match automation so that if the PO line item quantities and rates match the PO receipt and match the invoice, that vendor bill gets approved automatically. So it's one less thing that our accounting department has to do. So we only deal with the exceptions. So that was a huge win right there. Inventory valuations, just really easy to generate, so accounting loves that. Accounts payable, within the accounts payable operation, the ease of entering vendor bills is very straightforward. We use attachments, or they use attachments a lot, so when those bills come in through emails, they just attach those right to the vendor bill. It's there for historical reasons. Anyone that has permissions can go look at that information. And this is also true for both food vendors as well as non-food vendors like consulting and services and those types of things. And then in accounts receivable, that's another automation area. So when the sales orders are fulfilled through NetSuite, the accounts receivable, the invoices are generated automatically. So there's some back-end scripts that Myers-Holum helped develop for us, such that that just happens automatically. We do that in a batch, just in case there's any issues throughout the day with the food going out, that we can correct errors before the invoices. So around 6 o'clock at night, the batch of invoices just got sent out to our member agencies. We use fixed asset management all within NetSuite. And of course, the big gorilla in the room is the NetSuite Commerce Advanced, called SCA. So that's for all of our member agencies to place food orders for their pantries. SCA runs 24/7, and that gives our agencies flexibility in when they want to place orders. And the inventory is live real time, so all of that inventory is presented directly to our member agencies. And one thing Stephen hit on, we have a process that we developed in coordination with Myers-Holum to have what's called a restriction matrix. So as one example, if you're a pantry that is not allowed to, let's say, to receive USDA food for whatever reason, those item numbers will not appear in their when they're shopping in the web store. So that's really helpful. So because we do get audited because USDA is a federal government program, so it can't happen unless somebody miscodes something, of course. But so the restriction matrix is really valuable. Let me see, what other things? So the other things I would say that people have really adopted is the NetSuite Safe Search features. And that's one of the highlights from a user interaction. So that allows our team members to generate their own reports, if you will, or queries with very little training, and it allows them to get exactly what they need for their particular job function without the need to actually request something like that from the technology team. And all of these saved searches can be auto-emailed, so that helps, again, with exception reporting. And the other big win is for doing CSV or data imports directly into NetSuite. So a big use case for that is from our payroll system, we're able to bring in the payroll dollars from our payroll system, and with the CSV import, generate the journal entries required to post those dollars across the functional areas, where before you would have to do that manually. And of course, the financial reporting is very strong for both specific P&Ls and balance sheets, inventory values, and much more.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks, Rich. That's a great overview. I appreciate you going into that level of detail on all those areas that you're still using. And it sounds like, you know, since that original go live that we had 4 or 5 years ago, not only has the initial state of NetSuite persisted, but you've been able to expand some of your use cases and continue to grow end user adoption. So I think what would make sense next is we'll jump right into a demo, about 15 minutes of overview of Greater Boston Food Bank's instance. And we'll show that demo, and then we'll circle back for some Q&A. So we're really excited today to show you an overview demo of NetSuite for Food Banking. We're going to be giving this demo in Greater Boston Food Bank's NetSuite instance. And today we're just going to go over some of the basic elements and configurations of NetSuite for Food Banking and show the kind of some of the standard workflows that Boston uses today, and a lot of the similar ways that all of our food banking customers leverage NetSuite for their food banking operations. So I'm going to start off today just with a quick overview of the item master. Now, as we already talked about in the conversation so far, food banks will leverage NetSuite for all of their inventory management, procurement, distribution activities, and we're very often integrating with a WMS platform for the scanners and the handhelds and those WMS activities in the warehouse. But in every instance of NetSuite for Food Banking, your item master is always within NetSuite. So the first thing that I think is really interesting to show is that from all the food banks that we've worked with and we've seen, items are categorized with special prefixes depending on the sourcing of the item, where that food is originated from. So I'm going to show just a quick overview of some of our inventory items right now. And notice right off the bat that because this item is in the kind of starting with a 10,000 prefix for Greater Boston Food Bank, that probably means that this item is a USDA type item. And if I kind of transition through different types of items within NetSuite, you can see that different item codes represent different funding sources of inventory, different types of inventory as they come in. So in this case, I just switched to an item with a 7,000 prefix item code, and that means that this item is a donated type item. So one of the first kind of key takeaways here is that we have one item master in NetSuite that we're tracking all of the products that we're bringing in, whether through donation or through purchasing food direct from suppliers, or if that food is coming from the USDA or other state or federal agencies. We're not commingling different types of food under different product codes. And the actual creation of these item records as well within NetSuite has been pretty optimized for food banks. So you can see here that on a standard item card or product record within NetSuite, we're seeing the display name, code of that item, as well as the item number, pack size, the item weight, 4 pounds per case in this example. And then all of the Feeding America and food banking related classifications that obviously this item is donated, and then what Feeding America product categories and different Greater Boston Food Bank product categories that's falling into. Within NetSuite as well, I can see all of the inventory that I have across all of my locations. So right now for this item as an example, we're currently out of stock in all locations. But if I have multiple locations or even sub-locations within a warehouse, I can see the quantity on hand, the average cost by location, as well as the quantity that I have committed to our agencies and that quantity available as well. I can see the current purchase price, last purchase price of food, obviously the average cost, which we talked about, And then on our inventory detail subtab on item records is where I can see all of that lot number related information for the food that we're purchasing or that's being donated to us. Because we have warehouse management system integration on all of our food banking implementations, we can also track in NetSuite the case dimensions and the case cube, and that helps us drive some of the automated palletization and other warehouse management functions downstream in the warehouse as well. So if I go back to our list of items again, you could see that we've got lots of different product codes. Right now, about 5,600 active product codes in Greater Boston Food Bank. And I think one of the key drivers of bringing more features and functionality and a better user experience for agencies in our implementations is giving food banks the ability to drive more specificity into those product codes. So a lot of the times in implementations, when we go to work with food banks, we see that there are probably just more broad categories of items that we're tracking. But having a more robust system like NetSuite, I think, allows us to bring in probably a lot more product specificity. And if I click through into some of these maybe purchase products, which I think are in our 5s, our 6s, you can see that I start to get more and more product specificity, which obviously agencies love, and we can move away from just kind of broad categories of products. So in this case, a co-op program product, I have cereal, crispy rice, cocoa, and golden. It's kind of a little bit more specific product code for cereal, and I can track that as long as I have a standard weight per case and I have standard case dimensions. That's really kind of the minimum unit of measure that we would need to be able to track items in our inventory. Notice as well, we can see a web flag here on the product record, whether or not that's available online. And then lots of other, kind of defaults or checkboxes and options on my product record, which drive functionality, include on PO for available to promise, let us kind of sell that in advance, whether that's a meal box item, all these food banking specific preferences and configurations, we can kind of bundle out of the box with our implementation of NetSuite. And that makes the experience for companies that are implementing NetSuite or organizations that are implementing NetSuite for food banking pretty seamless. Now, the one area that I do want to talk about that everyone asks as well is restrictions. So how do I keep this inventory or this item 20756 only allocated and only available to be distributed to the right agencies? Well, the way that we've designed this is basically on every item record, we have an item restriction class, in this case, co-op only. And on all of our agency records, I'll just pull up an example agency record here. We also have a agency restriction class. So I'm looking at my agency list right now. I'm actually going to go into my recent records to pull up an agency that I was just working on. And in this Brookline Emergency Food Pantry, I can see that this agency has an agency restriction class of MEFAP, which is our Massachusetts, kind of version of TFAP, but they don't get USDA and there's no bulk. So if I want to kind of look up to see, well, what does this really mean? What types of food or which items specifically, products specifically that can this agency get? I can go into my matrix grid view here within NetSuite, and I can see that if an agency has MEFAP USDA no bulk, that they have access to retail donated and food fund, perishable MEFAP, dry and retail USDA, and they can have access to MEFAP turkeys as well. So where we see blanks here and these other column headers are where that agency is restricted from this inventory. So this agency, as an example, cannot get any CSFP. They're restricted from Brown Bag, Kids Cafe, and Co-op as well. So this is kind of just a quick way that we've pulled together kind of a framework for managing restrictions within NetSuite. So I can look at any agency, see their agency restriction class, and then by consulting our matrix view for restrictions, I can see pretty immediately whether or not an agency would have access to a certain type of product. So we've kind of reviewed the item record and the matrix restriction classes, and I'll just go and open up an agency record to view as well. So a lot of also food banking specific fields on our agency record. We can see that they have access to a food multiplier, which is kind of a tier of this agency. And we'll talk about that once we, in a little bit more detail on the online ordering. This agency can also see and be tracked against a minimum order weight and a maximum order weight. These are kind of standard requirements for food banking. We can keep track of which vehicle that they're using for pickups, what tier they are. This is often integrated with our CRM systems like Salesforce, how we're tiering to that agency, and even a link back to Salesforce for the folks that have both NetSuite and Salesforce access. And then from a financial point of view, I can see, in real time, the balance of that agency, their credit limit for any shared maintenance charges. I can see under sales, a list of all of their historical transactions here. These are all of the agency's historical orders. I can see at a quick glance just all of the items within a date range that this agency has received in the distribution. And I can also see a list of appointments for that agency. And if I want to drill into a specific appointment the agency has scheduled online or a recurring pickup, I can go ahead and just add up that appointment record, maybe change the pickup date or time. And there's a lot of other functionality in terms of scheduling appointments within the ordering window or overriding them that we can manage on the back end. But I'm not going to save anything. I'll kind of cancel that out on the appointment record. And so now that we've shown just a really high level overview, kind of an example of a product record, an example of an agency record here, and some of our restrictions, I'm going to go in and show an overview of what it would look like actually for an agency to work with us in the online ordering. So what I have here is an overview of, Shop GBFB or Shop Greater Boston Food Bank, and this is our online agency portal. And what I'm looking at right now is an example of what this would look like for an agency. And I think it's really cool as well that this online ordering is totally responsive. So if I have, if I'm on a mobile phone, this is kind of what it would look like. And if I'm on a desktop as an agency, obviously I can see sort of the desktop view. And I'll show this in a few other scenarios as well. But it's really important for us working with food banks to design an ordering portal that is very easily accessible, works across all browsers, and above all is easy to use for agencies. And I think the agencies of Greater Boston have really found a lot of value in this tool. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually logged in right now as Brookline Emergency Food Pantry. Just a quick note, as a volunteer, I actually right now have access to all of these different agencies. But right now, I'm only shopping for Brookline Emergency Food Pantry. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm selected there. And it's going to go ahead and take me to the agency account for Brookline. Oh, it wants me to log in again. So I'm just going to log in as my, test login as a volunteer. And now that I'm logged in again, I'm going to go ahead and have the ability to check out and place an order. So I'm going to go ahead and click the new order screen here. And I'm going to go ahead and I want to place an order for Brookline Emergency Food Pantry. Now, you may have seen in some other demos that we have a calendar view here of our online ordering. But over COVID, because of the changing environment, Greater Boston actually switched to exclusively recurring appointments. So any sort of calendar view that we used to have for agencies, able to select their own pickup time or schedule, right now for Boston is actually just kind of turned off. And it was, I think it's a great thing to talk about with Boston, kind of how easy of a change that was. I think they made this change predominantly on their own without having to get too many developers involved or, support IT folks involved. And what we see now really for Brookline is just a restriction to only being able to shop for recurring appointments. But on that note, I have one recurring appointment coming up, and that's for about 3 days from now. So I need to get that order placed before my cutoff time. So I'm going to go in and click continue shopping. And so as an agency volunteer, we talked about restrictions earlier. I have kind of a guarantee that I'm only seeing inventory that is applicable to me. And so this is kind of the raw inventory list of everything that's currently available. And any inventory that I don't have access to, notice there's no CSFP items on here. We don't have any brown bag items on here because this agency does not have access to those items. So they don't even see them in their item list. Before I start actually adding some more items to the cart, I will go over also this concept of max quantity. What max quantity is in our NetSuite for food banking is telling the agency it's not just the quantity that we have currently on hand in the warehouse. This is actually the max quantity that this specific agency can order for this pickup date or delivery date and time. So we may have far more than 290 cases of apples. We may have far more than 63 cases of trash bags or 8 cases of bags of produce. But because we have different agency restrictions, mins and maxes at the case level, this agency is seeing only the inventory that they're able to order for this pickup date and time. And this is also integrated with any inventory that is expiring. So if we do have inventory available today on April 11th, but it's going to be expiring before April 14th, those quantities of that item are not going to be shown here as well. So this is very much kept up to date in real time, and agencies have a really nice shopping experience in Suite Commerce Advanced and our NetSuite Online Ordering that just allows them to very easily find the items that they're looking for. I know even simple things are available, like a search functionality here, where we can, kind of look up apples or different products. We can also just kind of filter. So if I only want to look for donated food, I can hit that filter for donated food, and it's only going to show me the donated type inventory that I have available to me in the online ordering. I can go ahead and clear that as well. And if maybe I have access, this agency, we're showing them freezer food because they have a donated truck. Let's say today, when I'm doing placing the order for my delivery or pickup, I only want to look at dry. My frozen truck is, broken or it's going through repair. I can even, filter to dry, for example, and now I'm only seeing those dry type items available. So kind of a lot of functionality here and a lot of configurability as well. And what I'll do is I'm going to go add some items to the cart. So let's say I want to take 40 cases of applesauce. I'm going to go ahead and add that to my cart here. And then I also, let's say, definitely want to get some bananas. So I'm going to go ahead and get, let's say 500 pounds of bananas. I'm going to go ahead and add that to my cart. This is in a pound weight here versus cases. And then let's go ahead and I'll get 40 cases of ground beef. We also tend to show agencies that might want to order in whole pallets. If you hover over the pallet size here, this is telling me that for apples, as an example, apples are coming in 35 cases to the pallet. So if I want to go ahead and just get 2 pallets, I can type in 70 as an agency. I know that I'm going to get kind of 2 clean pallets of apples here as well. So now that I have added some stuff to my cart, I'm going to go ahead and click View Cart as an agency, and I'll go ahead and check out. And it's showing me actually, well, we have a max weight of 18,000 pounds, but an estimated cart weight of 24,000 pounds. So let's say I want to get rid of some pounds here. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these bananas. And that should drastically reduce my cart size. Perfect. So now I have 4,260 pounds in my cart. And I'm going to go ahead and check out as an agency. And once I've checked out here, this is going on terms. I actually could pay by credit card, but this agency gets invoiced for any shared maintenance. There is some shared maintenance here for that agency. I'm going to go ahead and just place that order. And that agency now has placed that order online. And pretty much immediately in real time, this order is going to show up in our NetSuite instance, and it will automatically send a note down to the warehouse to start staging that product and getting it ready for distribution. So this kind of concludes the quick overview demo that we wanted to give of NetSuite for food banking. Like I said, let's go ahead and now move on to, I think, some Q&A following up the presentation.
Perfect. Thanks for that overview, Stephen. It was really impactful to see everything that Rich was explaining at the beginning of the call in their actual NetSuite instance. As I mentioned at the very beginning, now is the time that we'll be dedicating the Q&A with Rich, Stephen, and Marissa. So if you haven't already, please submit your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom. I am going to go through a couple that I already see on the screen here. So I'm going to open this up to all of our panelists. Almost 3/4 of U.S. food waste comes from manufacturers, grocery stores, and restaurants. Rescuing fresh, whole foods is a priority for Feeding America. How does NetSuite help with that?
So, Rich, I'll let you chime in if you've got any other insight. In terms of, in terms of capturing more shelf life on the food that we are receiving, whether it's from donation or if sometimes it's even purchased food, I think the great thing about NetSuite is that it provides the ability to intake food and inventory, especially from rescue operations, process that food very quickly, and then be able also to either push it out or offer it to agencies in a choice format very quickly. So we just showed on our demo the available to promise functionality, and a lot of what our focus is on NetSuite implementations is providing not only more specificity around the inventory and the food that we have in our warehouse, so our agencies can make better decisions around choice, but also gaining a hold of our inventory in a more robust way, so that we can make quicker decisions on how we want to intake food rescue and how we want to distribute that out. Any other thoughts there, Rich, as well?
Sure, I have one pertaining to the available to promise. So that came up during a real world example early in our NetSuite usage, where bananas, when we got bananas in, and they usually came in towards the end of a week, that the bananas would sit on the shelf until Monday before we could distribute them, and they would just sit there and start aging more quickly. So with the available to promise, we were able to have agencies order the product before it actually was received into the system. So as long as the PO's dates were correct, we knew the product would come in on, let's say, a Friday, but the agencies could order that food before Friday for either a Friday delivery or a Monday delivery. So it allowed us to increase or minimize food waste at the food bank.
Thanks, Rich and Stephen. Appreciate you both chiming in there, especially giving that real-world example. Stephen, anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, we can take the next question.
Okay. Next question that came in, this one's probably for Stephen and Marissa. When should a food bank think about implementing an ERP system?
So, we work with a lot of new food banks now that are looking into making a decision about switching over to NetSuite, especially from Series or Primarius or sometimes a mix of legacy systems that they have. And right now, with the environment that we're all in, we see a lot of benefit for pretty much every food bank in the Feeding America network to take advantage of the more robust processes and features and capabilities that they will have with a new ERP system like NetSuite. So I don't think it's necessarily a question about when. It's just it's more along the lines of how, and I think the need is there for pretty much every food bank in the network and the ecosystem. What we're here to help with is also determining if we can support a food bank through a phased process and support food banks through tackling the things that really matter first, such as getting really solid inventory accuracy, taking on the capability to offer choice, and to devise and run more programs without a lot of manual oversight or effort. So even for the smaller food banks that are doing 10 to 20 million pounds of distribution a year, we believe that there's a lot of value in at least evaluating an ERP implementation.
Thanks, Stephen. I'll go to the next question. What advice do you have for food distribution businesses and food banks looking to change their existing system?
Yeah, I would say the most important thing to keep in mind is that this is an opportunity to thoroughly review your current processes and make any necessary changes to really look at best practices and how NetSuite can help you get to that point. Just kind of shifting your focus from this is how we do it to this is how we could be doing things better.
Thanks, Marissa. Anything to add there, Stephen or Rich? If not, it looks like we have time for, oh, go ahead.
Sure, I was just going to say it's a great point from Marissa. A lot of the times when we are in an implementation, NetSuite can have a certain way of doing things or a certain leading practice around a process that may not mirror exactly what a food bank is doing today, but it really is sometimes a better or a more efficient, simpler way of doing things. So I think what Rich and the team at Greater Boston did a really good job of is keeping things simple and solving complex challenges around, grant applications and agency restrictions and programs. Some of those more complex processes, even around allocations, we found really simple solutions in NetSuite to solve for those challenges. So a lot of, I think what Marissa echoed is that, a lot of it is about keeping processes simple or actually simplifying processes and still, retaining the same outcome.
Yeah, this is Rich. So I would echo that as well, and it's really for the project team, the food bank's project team that are on the team to implement a new system, is to keep an open mind, right? You can't go into an ERP system being closed-minded because you won't really gain the benefits of what the solution has to offer. So it's keep an open mind, be dedicated, think, quote, out of the box, close quote, and you'll have years of fun actually processing data that can be fun. But I view it just rewarding in seeing people use the system. I never hear people yelling at their computers. They may yell at other people, but it's not the system problem, right? It becomes people problems. But it's really rewarding to see how it's progressed. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. That's definitely something we hear across the board from our clients in the food bank space and other verticals, is being open and flexible during the process and relying on our great partners like Myers-Holum, who have done these implementations over and over for how we can improve the business. It looks like we have time for one more question. Could you address how implementing NetSuite ERP helps with compliance and applying for grants?
Well, I'll answer that first, then it would be great to hear from Rich. I think if there's one piece of feedback that we hear is the most positive in terms of our food banks that have been live on NetSuite for at least a few years, it's that with NetSuite, we have access to a lot more data. And the reporting and the analytics with saved searches or NetSuite reports, or even the ability to connect in a data warehouse or use Tableau, it just seems to have facilitated a lot more data, a lot more specific reporting that we can take from NetSuite and even merge with other data from Salesforce or other food banking tools that you're using. So I think the first step in convincing a donor to participate in a program is showing them with good data where the need is and kind of proving that out. And I think one of the biggest benefits that food banks that are running NetSuite have is that they have a much easier time pulling that data and formatting it in a way that is going to help them tell a story about a need or a specific challenge that they have, where a grant or a donation could help solve a problem. I don't know, Rich, if you want to talk to that, because I know that reporting also from your end has been one of the biggest improvements with NetSuite.
Yes, that's exactly right. So it really is all about the data, and we hear this every week that our donation or advancement team, the people that are soliciting donations, their donors come to them and they yearn for the data. They want to know how are we doing in these particular cities and towns in our particular service area. And because we've set up NetSuite, it's very flexible, but the data is just, it's easy to generate output from the data we collect. And because of the integration across all modules between, purchasing for product coming in and sales orders for product going out, we have a full story, and we've done a lot with automation of these reports such that we can pretty much generate a report and send that off to the advancement team and, help in the cause. So it's all about data. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks,
That's
team.
great to hear.
It looks like we are about out of time. So in closing, I did want to thank the Greater Boston Food Bank and the Myers-Holum team, specifically Rich, Stephen, and Marissa, for your time today and all the great content that we shared. It was really insightful to hear more about Greater Boston Food Bank's journey with NetSuite and Myers-Holum, and also how all food banks can consider transforming their operations with NetSuite. As I mentioned at the beginning of today's event, this event was recorded, and we will be sending out the on-demand version within the next couple hours. If you have any other questions that we didn't get to today, we will follow up with you after the event, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon. Thanks, everybody.